Welcome to another edition of Unplug It as we move towards round three. Darren Parkin here back in the chair after stepping out last week. And a big thank you to Philip Deladakis for jumping in to the host chair and doing brilliantly and speaking very forthright on a number of really significant issues. It was well received and certainly won't be the last time we speak to him. So thank you for covering so well, and also to the boys for soldiering on when one soldier had departed the ship last week. But it was a victory. It was a day of frustration, ultimately a pretty pleasing win against Fremantle, but one that was harder work than it needed to be. And from a personal point of view, it had kind of shades of 2017 about it, where we would dominate a lot of games and just not convert. And it was a game we won by 10 points that we should have won by at least 7 goals on the balance of the game. We were completely dominant through the first half with inside 50 differential. We had countless shots. Even in the last quarter, we could have potentially buried the game. But great to get away with it. I guess that was a negative. There was plenty of positives, and obviously Max King, a match-winning performance, and Jack Higgins responding to the disappointment of the week before. I thought everybody on the most part played pretty well, with a couple of exceptions, but we'll work through that later. It was pleasing to win it because obviously we've got a tricky but winnable match this week. You wouldn't want to be entering that at 0-2, and it gives us a chance to build a bit of momentum with plenty to still improve. We must convert better when we go inside 50 if we are to win enough games to play finals this year. Nick, your assessment of it, obviously you and H watched that one together in McKinnon, and it was hard work, but one that felt pretty satisfying in the end.
It was hard work. It was hard work to watch the game, so I can only imagine how hard it must have been to be out there. But yeah, the game itself was tough. It was ugly. It was not fun, but reality is that an interstate victory is always valuable, no matter how you get it, who it's against, where it is. Those games interstate are tough. Freo over there is always tough, and it's always nice to get a win over there in front of what is a really decent sized fan base over in Perth, and they must have been rapt to be able to see a win.
And we've never won at that venue before. We've obviously, our last win in Perth was 2017 against Fremantle, but never won at Optus. So good to tick that box as well, H. And we've usually played okay there. We've lost some close games at the venue, but good to get the result.
Yeah, we seem to be competitive. We found a couple of times there we've almost been there at the end, but they've just pulled, like West Coast just pulled away against us one time in the end, and it's not a place we find, I guess, too scary to play. Some teams, I think, really dread going there. Sometimes they can turn it on in Melbourne and then head over there and turn into an absolute rabble. We haven't played bad football. It's I don't know whether it's the similarity between maybe Marvel and there being a bit of a harder surface, the drier ground at the same time. Conditions don't phase us too much at times, it seems. So luckily the weather wasn't a scorching hot day there like Perth can turn on sometimes, so that played to our advantage a little bit. Freo obviously missing a few players. I think if I had Fife, if they had Mundy, that sort of thing, we may have been in a little bit of trouble, because they turned it on for 10-15 minutes themselves, and that counters the 10-15 minutes that we absolutely dominated them. So it's a fact of it's lucky, but so many things went our way that on the day that got us the 4 points. So as I say, take the 4 points, get home, and that's all you can do. If we came back without the points, I think it probably would have hurt, and I think we would be doing a bit of a different pod tonight.
Yeah, Parker, definitely.
You mentioned the inside 50 differential, and you're right. And that first half, we dominated, and I think it was really just, it was a very St Kilda performance in that, we'd get our hands on the ball plenty. We dominated the clearances. I think by the end of the game, it was 37-26 clearances, but we dominated them in the middle as well, like at the centre clearances. We had a lot more of the ball, but just some disgusting decision-making and terrible execution that I guess we're known for. It's been that way for donkey's years. I just don't know. I don't know how we can get out of this routine of being able to win the ball fine, but dispose of it terribly. But really, like H said, it's kind of lucky that Freo didn't put their foot down for a bit longer, and it was only that they were worse than us for a little bit longer than us.
Yeah, but basically, and it reminded me a little bit of, a lot of these previous performances from years gone by. And it's where stats can be deceiving. I know the coaching group have been asked about that last week, I think, after the Collingwood game, about our creating scores when we go forward. And they said, look, our numbers are about where the AFL average is, but that the numbers don't tell you what you're seeing with your eyes. That may well be the case, but we slaughter so many inside 50s, and we do it so often. It's not a once-off. It's a problem, and it's the difference. It'll hold us back from winning, 8 or 9 games as opposed to winning 12 or 13. And it'll be the difference between us having a percentage of 110 and a percentage of 98, because when we win games, we'll win them by 15 points, 11 points, 14 points. I made the comment on Twitter that it feels like we have to absolutely dominate a team to beat them, because we need so many entries and so many shots. And it has to be rectified. We're generally a bit better at Marvel in that space, but to me, that's the biggest frustration, because where we break down is where we always break down. And there's got to be a better way to do that, moving the ball forward.
You're right. I guess that the difference was in this game is that, we had a third quarter from Max King where, he turned the game on its head. Jack Higgins took his opportunities and took his chances. And I mean, how nice was it to see both of them kind of click into gear in the same game? And if that happens more often than not, we'll win more often than not, as opposed to relying on one of them to have a big game and the other one kind of struggles through. But, if they can both play pretty consistent footy, then that in itself will go a long way to finishing a lot of the good work that happens further up the field.
Yeah, 100%. It's something that you tear your hair out. I mean, against Collingwood, when we had the momentum in the third quarter, we missed shots. We frequently make situations where we're running into an open goal, somehow an inexplicable mistake. And I know Tim Membry's normally a pretty good kick for goal, but he's obviously missed 3 that were pretty gettable. Even late in the third quarter, after we kicked 6 in a row or whatever it was, we then hit the post. I think Gresham hit the post on the run, then we missed 2 set shots, then another one right at the start of the last quarter. So that kept the game alive instead of drilling it shut and being 5.5 goals in front. But I know that's probably being ultra critical, because I think ultimately enough guys played well that it was a step in the right direction. But it's more about how we turn that into, beating a team like Richmond and getting on a roll and pushing ourselves into some form.
Yeah, I was going to say that one big difference you look at too is Freo made a few mistakes going to the forward line. The sort of mistakes if Collingwood had made the week before, we would have beaten Collingwood as well. Mm-hmm. They were just so clean against us that week that stopping that run that Collingwood had, we kind of didn't do it against Freo either. They just didn't hit the target as well. So that's where we became lucky also, in the fact that they weren't as good using the ball. They weren't as clean. They weren't as using the spaces quite as well. We seem to still be hanging back again as we did the week before. I felt we were too far away from Collingwood the week before, and we're sort of still doing that same zone again. There was no, putting the pressure up on the back line coming out. They still sort of go, there's a player 10 metres that way, player 10 metres that way, I'll stand in the middle and go stand the mark, whichever one takes the mark. There's no, I'm going to get up and pressure that one, make them kick out wider. That's sort of where they're looking, going, well, they're getting the easier kicks down the middle because we're not pressuring the player in the middle, as opposed to making him kick out wider.
We spoke about it last week, and you and I, when we were watching the game, even in that first half, talking about how easy it is for other clubs to kind of bring the ball out of defence, into the middle of the ground or across half forward against us, and we have the opposite issues, that it's so difficult for us to do the same thing. And they had options almost every time they brought the ball out of defence, whether it was Luke Ryan or Brayshaw or whatever. They always had a guy running off into space that was ready to receive and all that sort of stuff. And Yeah, I don't know what it is, because it can't be a coaching issue, because this is an issue that we've had for years. Again, like disposal, like execution, and we never seem to have that. But I also think that it can't be understated the impact that it had on both Fremantle and us. And I know Nathan O'Driscoll kicked a goal when he came on, but Sean Darcy going off was a massive influence and impact on Fremantle's game, and also allowed a little bit more action around the ground for Marshall and Hayes.
For sure. And I mean, it allowed us really to translate our dominance onto the scoreboard. I've sort of had that argument with a lot of Freo fans saying, oh, we're outplaying you anyway. It just helped us to translate it. It would have been a bit of a false dawn had they have won the game, seemingly. But and look, Fremantle had some COVID absences. We still had some players out with injury. I thought our midfield, on the most part, was pretty good. Josh Battle down back probably played his or close to his best game for the club. I know he's played well in defence before. Our defensive unit was pretty good. I thought Webster was solid. Lynott was okay in his first game for the club. But yeah, through the middle, even guys like Seb Ross, I think, was pretty solid. Sinclair, Crouch was good. They all had aggression. They all had a pretty handy day. And then obviously the forwards took their chances. So in terms of votes out of that performance, so I reckon we probably had 16 or 17 players that I would give a genuine tick to. And, I can give apologies to Brad Crouch. I can give apologies to Ross. I can give apologies to Webster, even Marshall. But I thought the three most influential players on the game were the three that I've given the votes to. I gave one vote to Jack Higgins, I gave 2 votes to Max King, and I gave 3 votes to Josh Battle. I think they were the reason we won the game, those 3 players for mine. H, how did you sort of see it?
I would have liked to have been able to give about 4 or 5 players 1 vote and then give a 3, but
yeah, we can make our own rules. Do whatever you want.
I'll stick to the regular format, so I don't get confused telling it up. I tossed up between King and Higgins, and I just took Higgins ahead of him. Max gave us that one big patch where he looked like he was going to tear the game apart and keep going. We didn't. We saw a little of him before it. We saw a little bit of him after it, but those periods didn't really have a lot of influence. I just feel Higgins' total game was a little bit better than what Max's was. So I gave him the 1. Go to Brad Crouch. I actually really enjoyed what he did on the weekend. I thought it's probably one of the better games he has played for us. At times he didn't feel like he was sort of there, but the usage he had, there's a few turnovers there, but it got us moving. We felt really stagnant for a few moments there, but a few times he busted through and picked the ball up and got us moving again. It's the sort of thing I think we need. The whole, as with Nick saying, and about not being able to move the ball forward. He's not our fastest player by far. He's not our best kick in the team, but he just made the team move. He pushed us forward and got us moving, and just gave us that little bit of attack that we sort of were missing for most of the game. And 3, I had to give to Josh Battle. Fantastic game. He's probably the reason we win. I think it was it 8 or 9 intercept marks in the back 50. It's an amazing number when you look at it. You think back to play like Goose Maguire. That's the sort of thing he was doing for us before he got injured.
13 marks and 13 intercepts.
I think 9 of them were in the back 50 though, which was it's a number you don't see from a lot of defenders. It's the rebound, the just stopping their attack. It's the sort of game that's what we wanted from him. We going, you've got a job, and he went and did it. And we could not have asked for any more from him on the weekend. That's almost 100% game from him.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to disagree with both of you there. I have disagreed with you both on the one vote, though. I think, like you both said, there's any number of guys that you could give a vote to or a couple of votes to. And my apologies to Brad Hill, 30 touches, 4 score involvements, 540 metres gained. I thought he was pretty good. Jack Sinclair, 25 touches, 6 tackles, 6 clearances, 5 inside 50s, having an impact both in the middle, at ground level in the clinches, but also out in space, out on the wing and across half forward as well. Jack Higgins, an apology. Thought he was very good and very close. But one out of left field, I gave one vote to Dan McKenzie. I thought it was probably his best game for the club. And we spoke last week, H, about when we win the ball across half back and we stop and we prop and we wait and we look for another option and whatever. But Dan McKenzie, I thought, was one of the few players last week that took the game on, that would take possession and run and look forward and look for another option forward of centre and look to make an impact dynamically, offensively off halfback. I thought he was very good. 19 touches, 7 intercepts, 5 inside 50s, 490 metres gained, I should say. And I thought that was probably his best game. And I really feel like he's a certain best 22 player these days. I think that he has to be picked because of his versatility. He can play a number of roles across halfback, push up to the wing, back pocket, etc. Can play run with roles. But he was just one of the few that in that first half was looking to make things happen across halfback and take the game on and have an impact offensively. I gave 2 votes to Max King. Stat wise, wasn't the complete performance by any means, as you mentioned, H, but I thought his third quarter just kind of pulled the game away from Freo and was the turning point for us. It was the reason we won the game. And the 3 votes to Josh Battle was probably the reason we were still in the game to that point and allowed Max King to do some of that work inside forward 50. I thought you're both right. It's probably Battle's best game and was just everywhere in the back half for us. And, when we talk about we needed another big body defender to help guys like Dougal Howard out in the back half, that's exactly what we were talking about. Intercept mark, reading the ball, being able to be that kind of second or third man to a contest and impact the contest in the air, be able to distribute by foot and by hand really well, which we know he can do. It was a complete game from Josh Battle. So 3 votes for him.
Yeah, that last quarter, I think, especially when we're under siege a bit, when they were getting a bit of momentum, he was pivotal in that. And I like all of those comments. And I think, Brad Hill's almost there. I think, I know it's only been a couple of games, but he's been a bit inconsistent. I think the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of this season, he's been a really good contributor and obviously playing that mixed role between mainly halfback, but a bit through the middle and getting the type of numbers and, run and carry that we hope we get from him all the time. So it's been a pleasing start to the year for him. A man who was racking up big numbers for a long, long time. When we think of the number 3, a lot of people in the modern generation would immediately go to somebody like a Jack or go to Nathan Burke or players along those particular lines. But if you go back 3 or 4 generations to the 1960s, one of the finest players ever to wear that number across any club joins us on the podcast this week, and I speak of Ross Smith.
It was the performance of Ross Smith in winning the Brownlow medal, the 3rd St Kilda win in as many years. Smith would captain and coach the club in years ahead and is revered as one of the true champions of the red, white and black.
Smith eventually gets the kick. It's a high one.
Price comes out to get it. Richardson comes in. Richardson had it, but he's lost it to Smith of St Kilda. Smith now
He would seek the limelight. He didn't want to have a high profile, but I was possibly one of the finest persons that I had the pleasure of coaching. He's a very talented little player. He mightn't have been as polished as some of the great Rovers, but he was a desperate player. He had enormous courage and he was a great leader in the club and his quiet manner. And now Rossi's possibly the finest person that I had the pleasure of coaching.
Well, there are three players that have on their CV that they are a Premiership player with St Kilda and a Brownlow medalist. One of them is Verdon Howell, one of them is Ian Stewart, and one of them is Ross Smith, who joins us now. 222 games with the club, also coached St Kilda in 1977, won the best and fairest twice, was captain for 3 years, captained Victoria, won a premiership as coach over in the West with Subiaco, and is in the Australian Football Hall of Fame, and of course a starring member of that 1966 premiership team, winning the Brownlow the year after in 67. Ross, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Darren.
Now, when you, I guess, hear those sorts of accolades, how often does it sort of come back into your mind, some of those moments, whether it's the grand final, whether it's the Brownlow, because it is a very, very impressive CV?
I guess it's the premiership which you remember most, because that's a team affair, and I've got some very good friends with whom I played. You mentioned Bob Murray, and I see him sort of at least annually. We have an annual game of golf with he and Jeff Moran. Both of us, or three of us, played in the grand final. We played with another St Kilda player, Paul Kellery, and have a great day. But it's great to get together with those guys, and quite a number of us got together just before Christmas to go up and see Cowboy Neil up in Wodonga. And it was just good to get together, talk over old times, and we kicked further and took higher marks than we did previously. But no, it's just good to get together with that group of guys.
Ross, you're known as probably the best rover in the history of St Kilda Football Club, as says the St Kilda website. How does it make you feel? You averaged 25 disposals a game over the course of a season, in 2 seasons of your entire career. How does it make you feel watching, I guess, players now that are averaging, 35, 37, 40 touches a week?
Oh, look, I think it's just a part of the evolution of the game and the way in which the game is played, that the players go on and off the ground now. So I don't know whether I would have adapted to being taken off for a little while, but look, I think it's just the way in which the game is played, that there's more handballs and there's a more sort of handball and then backing up for handball and so on. And I think within the space of 10 seconds, you've got 3 or 4 possessions.
Going back to the start of your career, sort of, where did you start with football? Did you start at a very early age? Did you pick it up like very early on? And then how did that progress? What did you go through to then end up at the club?
I was a bit of a late starter, because I had quite a number of activities in my youth, and I was a member of the Boy Scout group, which was a very active scout group, but I didn't play in football until I was 14 years of age. And my school teacher at the time said, oh, look, he was coaching the under-19 team, which played just up the road from the school. He said, oh, look, I'd like you to come up and have a game with us. And so I went up, played with the Hampton Scouts, as they were called then. They're now known as the Hampton Rovers, but Hampton Scouts at the time. And we went on to win the premiership in the under-19 competition. So I started as a 14-year-old and played until I was 18. I played for 4 years there. And that was my start. And then I went to St Kilda at the end of my secondary school. I went to St Kilda because I lived in St Kilda's area. I was zoned to St Kilda. I was an avid Essendon fan, and I'd go with my brother and sister to watch the Essendon each day, because I had an auntie and uncle who lived near the ground out there. And loved the football, but I was zoned to St Kilda. And it was probably a good thing, because at the time St Kilda was just starting its development as a team. Alan Jeans was in his first year as coach, and there was about 4 or 5 of us who were vying for roving positions. And I was fortunate enough I played 1 game in the seconds, and then I played in the seniors.
It's been an amazing journey. Your second game, or your first game, was Alan Jean's second game as coach. We would lose that game to Essendon at Windy Hill, but you'd play in 6 wins in a row after that. We'd make the finals for the first time in 22 years. What was it like in that first year? You had a young coach that went on to be a legend of the club, and you had a lot of players that went on to be legends of the club. Did it feel like the group was going somewhere?
Yes, I think it was. I think that 61 was the start of the era. For the Jeans era, but I think it was sort of in 63 when I think it was when Bob Murray, Carl Dietrich, Baldock came in 62. So we were gradually developing a team that was going to feature in finals. and we played in the finals in 61. We played it again in 1963, but we then got into we were top of the ladder in 65, but we were knocked off by Essendon. They came up from fourth position to beat us in the grand final.
Ross, you played a lot of games during those first couple of years of your career, but you weren't known as I guess, a star of the team until that kind of 66, 67 period. What was it that kind of made the difference in your career, that kind of you went from being a regular to a star at that point?
Well, I don't know whether I agree with it being a star, but anyway, I think the change was that Alan Jeans gave two things. One is I think I matured and developed as a player and understood what was required to play the game. But then also in 1965, Alan Jeans gave me a different role. He gave me a more fulfilling role. He recognised that I had a certain level of fitness which would allow me to be a run-with player and to row for the majority of the game. And so I would probably stay on the ball for 75, 80% of the game, but running with my opponents, who Alan's theory was that they would lead me to the ball. My fitness and strength would allow me, once I got there, to win the ball. And he was proven right. And I think in 1965, I was started that task. And then 66 developed it even more. And obviously in 67, I had one of the best years.
Probably an understatement. An understatement to say that you weren't a star and you won a Brownlow. just a little bit humble, maybe.
Oh, maybe. But look, I think the results speak for themselves. And if people want to put that status, that's fine. I'm happy to go along with that, particularly in my later years.
So you started basically the same time Jeans did as coach. You only played under him. How was you see coaches changing so often these days, and even back then they changed quite often. How was it playing under one coach for the entire career? Is it something you think that either it helped you with the consistency, or do you think maybe a change at some point could have made some sort of difference to yourself?
Well, we'll never know the latter, but I think what St Kilda had at the time was they had stability. And in the previous decade, they'd had a range of coaches and CEOs and presidents. And I think that the combination of Graham Huggins as the president, Ian Drake as the secretary, and Alan Jeans as the coach, I think they worked very well as a team. And there was certainly some consistency within the way in which the club was operated. And I think that gave us the stability. And they went out and I think they strategically looked for players and say the recruitment of people like Darryl Baldock, and then the recruitment of Ian Stewart, the local players like Carl Dietrich and Jimmy Reed and Jeff Moran and those other players complemented the recruiting strategy.
Can you take us through your memories of 66? And we obviously know how significant a day it was for us. And I guess reflecting on the whole era, under Alan Jeans, we made the finals 9 times, 5 preliminary finals, 3 grand finals. Is there a part of you that feels we should have won more than one in that era?
I think yes. That 65, I think we're probably the better team for the year, but Essendon were too good on that particular day and they had the momentum going up. I think 65 gave us the experience that allowed us to win in 66, that when we played in 65, the second semi-final, which we won to go into the grand final, that was only our third final. We'd played 61 in the first semi-final, similarly in 63, and then 65, we'd played the second semi, go straight to the grand final. So we're really relatively inexperienced in comparison to the Essendon players at that era, because they'd won in 62, and the majority of them had continued on and played in 65. So they knew what finals was all about. And we were, I suppose, in comparison, relative newcomers to finals experience. And I think it's very important to have that finals experience. So that gave us, I think, a little bit more strength and conviction to go into 66. We were stronger then. I think Jeans made a very strategic decision when he picked Bingley to play on Tuddy, who had kicked 7 goals in the second semi for us in that year, and then we curtailed some of their better players. and we were able to win that game.
Ross, there are a lot of stories, obviously, about the legend of that day, and so many great players, obviously, being the only team to have done it for us. But Darryl Baldock, tell us a little bit about Doc, the man and the player, and just how bad was his injury on the day of that grand final?
Well, I'm not really aware of the nature of his injury, but Baldock had an amazing influence on our team. And he was the focal point of our forward line, together with Cowboy Neal. Cowboy kicked 5 goals on that game, and he was true. He could have kicked about 7 or 8 had he kicked accurately. But Baldock was a focal point of our attack. He was a player who was only short in stature. He was probably no more than about 5'9", 5'10", but he was able to hold down that centre forward position or centre half forward position very well. And if the ball got on the ground, you knew that Baldock would keep the ball himself between his opponent and the ball and be able to win it on more occasions. He was just a courageous player. He just had superb skills on either side of his body. He was one of the few players in that era to be to be able to kick left and right foot, to handball left and right hand, etc. So that's what made him a little bit special. And as a person, he was a honest person. He was a person of integrity. He had a very strong work ethic out on the ground.
Yeah, thinking back to when you won the Brownlow, it was a very different thing back then compared to what we see these days. Presented on grand final day in front of the grand final crowd, and yourself and I think second and third just come up as well. There might have been a couple of other awards also given on the same day. We saw Stuart win at 65-66 when we did play in the game. 67 also we didn't play in the grand final. How do you think you may have gone if you had picked up one of those other 65 or 66 and then moving into the game afterwards? How do you think your preparation might have gone with that?
I think the preparation might have been pretty much the same, but the psychological pressure might have been a bit different. So, you've got to really compliment someone like Ian Stewart, who played unbelievably well in that grand final in 66. Here he was, won his second Brownlow medal, and he was one of our best players on the day. He just had an ability to produce when it was required. It's certainly in my day, the count of the Brownlow was on through the radio. And it certainly wasn't at Crown Casino as it is today. And the counties are it was very more lacklustre then.
You had a series of great seasons after the Brownlow, but 1971 in particular, you and a lot of your teammates starred. I did ask my father, who watched you play a lot of football, if he could ask Ross any question, and he said, how did we lose 71? So I guess I put that question to you as to how we lost 71, but also I guess the second part of that, in 72, you missed the prelim, and we had a lot of guys that were injured or banged up, but played really well against Carlton in that prelim and narrowly lost. So that was obviously a very good team as well.
Yes, well, 71 was probably a missed opportunity. We weren't able to capitalise on the lead we had at three-quarter time, and a guy called Bob Keddy seemed to just pull a few marks out of the air. He had hardly got a kick for the previous 3 quarters and just seemed to find the ball in that last quarter, unfortunately, and we frittered away one. And I think that was the one that, well, to be honest, the Hawthorn in that year we'd played Hawthorn twice. They beat us in the second semi-final, and then we played them again in the grand final. So in some ways, they probably, on the balance of probabilities, they're more likely to win. But we nearly pinched it. But we did very well to do as well as we did. And as far as the missing the prelim final in 72, unfortunately, I got a groin injury in the previous game, and I even had 2 weeks because it was a drawn game, and it gave me an extra week, but it wasn't sufficient to allow me to play. In fact, when I went to Perth to coach Subiaco, I went over there to do a postgraduate study. That was the driving force of me going to Perth. But I didn't know until probably January, February that I was going to be able to play over there, because it just took a while to recover from it.
Should you have won the Brownlow in 71? You had a couple of teammates that might have pinched some votes from you in the end, but you had a pretty good year that year.
Yes, I did. And in fact, I spoke to John McIntosh, who unfortunately passed away late last year. And it was only about a month before, and I rang him and had a chat to him. And I said, Macco, I said, I'd probably cost you a Brownlow and you cost me a Brownlow, because there was one round to go. McIntosh had 18, Stewart had 18, and Smith had 16. And I thought, well, look, if neither of them get one, I could get 3 and knock them both off. Well, the only one who got any votes was Stewie to get his. So that's why I said to Macco, I think I cost you a Brownlow. And it's a bit like the Melbourne players last year, that a number of them were playing so well and scored so well, but they probably, in many ways, they cut the options for each of them.
Now, one thing you were involved with as well was the move from Junction Oval to Moorabbin. So on a personal level, how did you find the transition from the one to the other? And we know they're quite different grounds. Not sure what year the local showers came in, but what was it like in the transition between the two?
Well, from a personal point of view, I was very happy, because Moorabbin was just up the road from where I lived in Hampton. And previously I had to go to the St Kilda Junction ground. I remember when I was first recruited, I didn't have a car at the time. I had to take the train and walk down to the Junction Oval. It was a bit difficult to get to. But moving from the Junction Oval to Moorabbin, I think was fairly easy, and the transition was good from the point of view that the club got us involved in embracing Moorabbin as a home ground. And for example, I spoke recently to some of the players about how it must have been about 20 of us all lined up in a line, walking up and down the ground, picking up pebbles. So the ground was being top dressed. So they didn't, in those days, they didn't have the rolling out of the grass. They actually sowed the grass with seeds. And so we had, prior to the seeding of the ground, we went and picked up all the pebbles off the ground so that it made it a lot cleaner for the green. So anyway, by getting us involved as players in the activities, we became part and parcel of the transition to Moorabbin. And then when 55,000 people came to the first game, and we won it against Collingwood, that was really the start of us having some very good football. And we finished off in 65 as playing off in the grand final.
Now, you kind of touched on it, heading to Perth for a postgraduate degree and spending some time with Subiaco. So I guess that was the catalyst for the move. And then coming back in 75, was that just simply a case of being the end of that study period and you were able to come back and have another year? Yes.
And I was also offered an assistant coaching role to Alan Jeans, and I thought that was a good progression in I guess, my transition from playing to probably coaching. And there was an offer of when Alan was ready to step down that I would be given the coaching role. And then, fortunately or unfortunately, through the year we had a number of injuries, and Jeansy said to me one night, he said, "I think you're going to have to play, Smithy." So I played. I think it was halfway through the year I played, and well, actually I was out on the ground most of the time. But I was lecturing at the time, and the students were having a bit of fun, and they took a bet to see whether I'd get a Brownlow vote in that year. Well, I did, so I surprised myself.
Were there any wages or anything with the students?
No. That was their own bit of fun. Yeah.
What was so Darren mentioned the study period in WA and your time at Subi, but what was the reason behind the move? I mean, it seems like you probably could have kept going for another couple of years with the club first, but why then? Why in 73 did you make that move?
I got to the stage in my professional career. I remember football was only part-time, and so therefore our career was pretty important, and I felt that I needed higher qualifications to keep my job and also to get promotion within the lecturing field. And so I was offered a postgraduate scholarship from the University of Western Australia to go over and study in education, in physical education. And so that was the opportunity for me to go there. And that was playing football was the means to the end of getting the higher degree. And so I studied full-time for 2 years and then came back at the end of it after having successfully completed a Master of Education degree.
So you captained the club 70 to 72, but in 72 you also captained the state. How was the feeling of basically being told, okay, you're leading your state once we go into battle against all the other states I'm assuming it was the Carnivals that year, and just the honour of being pretty much picked as the number one player in the state to lead your team?
I don't know about being the number one player, but I was certainly honoured to be elected captain. And also, you've got to note that Alan Jeans was the coach at the time. And I think that Alan wanted somebody who would, I guess, epitomise the things that he was trying to sell to the team. And we had a very good working relationship as captain and coach at St Kilda over a long period of time. I had great respect for Alan. And I think he was keen for me to be captain, and I was one of, I think, 3 St Kilda players who were in the team. Travis Payes, Barry Lawrence, were also in the team as well.
The final one from me, I guess, a two-parter. Your relationship with Alan Jeans has been well documented. It's often been suggested that you might have been a favourite son or one of the coach's very favourites due to your coachability, if you will. But when you then took on the role coaching in 77, did you base a lot of that off what Alan had sort of brought to the table? And did you ever cop a spray from him during your career?
Well, I don't know whether I copped a spray, but every now and again there might have been a comment made. But I think he's also very good at congratulating. I can remember one day I was chasing somebody. It was in a final, and I put him under a little bit of pressure, and it stopped him from kicking a goal, and he sort of pulled him out. And Jeans made a point of saying, well chased. So I think that he had a good balance of criticising as well as giving a positive reinforcement. And I've forgotten the first part of the question.
Your coaching philosophy, obviously going into 77. Yeah.
In some ways, I found it difficult to coach after Alan because if I was critical of some of the things that we've done, I felt as though I was criticising Alan, and I found that difficult to cope with. So I had to sort of, I guess, choose my words carefully, or choose the way in which I sort of expressed them, so that it wasn't reflecting on Alan. And remember that Alan was in the background. He was at the club, but he was in the background, and I didn't want to be seen to be criticising Alan, or for the press to find that I had said something which was contrary to what Alan had, or Alan's philosophy. But in the main, we have similar philosophies. We had different ways of going about it. Alan was a bit more volatile than I was. I'm a more quieter approach and more studious approach.
Ross, last one from me, but going back to that day in 1966, where on the ground were you when Barry Breen's wobbly punt wobbled through the point post, and also when Bob Murray took that mark at the end of the game? But what are your overarching memories of those final minutes or seconds? And when was there a moment before the siren went that you actually thought, we've got this?
No, because it was still in flux, I guess, because actually I just happened to see it the other night on television, and I remember being behind Breeny when he kicked the goal, because there was a ball up, and he grabbed the ball and kicked it. So I was around there and saw that it went through, and then there was the ball was kicked out, and it was kicked out to Tuddy, and there was nobody seemed to go over to Tuddy, so I had to start running for him, and so I was round about at centre half forward when Bob Murray marked the ball. So I was round about there, and then he kicked it out to Alamaro, who marked it just as the siren sounded. So the thing that I can remember most was the actual sound of the the crowd. You know, when the scores became level, I have never heard a louder sound than I did on that particular occasion when the scores became level, and then once again when we got the behind. It was just an unbelievable sound that the sound was reverberating in and out of the stadium. It was like it was bouncing off the stadium. It was ricocheting around the stadium, and that's my great recollection from that occasion.
And yeah, finally, the honours that have come after your career. You've been named in the Hall of Fame, St Kilda Team of the Century. How do those sort of things sit against winning a premiership, winning the Brownlow? Are they right up there with that, in the same sort of category?
Yes, I think it's recognition, I guess, that you have received. And what I like about going to the Hall of Fame function is that generally only the Hall of Fame members who go there, and there's a genuine respect for one another from your players of the era. Unfortunately, I generally sit with someone like a Peter Bedford and players in my era, and there was a genuine respect for one another and for what you've achieved. So that's good. But ultimately, what we play for is to win a grand final. And fortunately, I'm one of 20 players at St Kilda who have got that premiership medallion. And that's what we strive for. That's what the guys today are striving for.
Ross, we long for the day when you get that company. It's undeniable to say you're one of the greatest players that ever played for the club. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate all you did. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation.
Ross Smith there, Brownlow medalist, two-time best and fairest winner, premiership player. He's got a CV that everybody would absolutely die for, and not many people that have played for our club can boast what he has against his name, and a terrific speaker as well. So great to have him join us on the program, and we've been able to chat to a few members of that premiership team now, and we've got a couple of others in the pipeline. So looking forward to those opportunities a bit later on. We look ahead to Maddie's match, of course, for Maddie Rewalt's vision, and make sure you if you get the chance, if you head along to the game or to the ground, you make your donations and support that cause. Wear purple, Maddie's favourite colour, and support that all the way. So a tremendous cause, and for the Rewalt family, obviously Jack's still running around, unfortunately, with the Tigers, and Nick obviously doing some terrific stuff in the media. So a great cause, and long may it continue. But we take on Richmond this week, and from a Tigers perspective, looking at those matches, I reckon we've either been terrific or terrible for probably the last 5 years against Richmond. It's been one or the other. We haven't had many games where you walk away from a Richmond game going, oh, yeah, we were all right today. We lost, but we were okay. It's usually either a blowout one way or a blowout the other. We've had some amazing wins and some dreadful losses. Probably the only performance I'd say in it that falls into that serviceable category was the semi-final we lost to them, where we're okay in that game, but that's probably the only one. So do we get the good one or the bad one this week? The Tigers are a little bit different to probably what we're used to seeing with them. Clearly, their midfield without Dusty and Dion Prestia and Kane Lambert's changed. There's no Basher Hooley there anymore, and Vlosten's injured, but they're playing two rucks, which they haven't always done. Obviously, Bolter spending a fair bit of time forward. Soldo obviously stepping into the centre square. Their defence with Tarrant and other bits and pieces. So it's a slightly different Richmond. Still a very well-drilled, well set up team, and I think if you look at their fortnight, they were terrific last week against the Giants, and even in round one, when you put it in perspective, they led Carlton by 4 goals early in the last quarter. Given the form Carlton's in, that's handy. So they're going to be a tricky team to beat, but in saying that, there's some vulnerabilities there, and I don't think it's a bad matchup for us if we take our chances. I'd love to have the likes of Clark and Jones in the middle. We won't. But certainly Ryder frees us up a bit with Jack Hayes, who's been named on the extended bench, and I hope they keep him in and play him forward. So the changes as it stands, Cooper Sharman goes out of that squad. He was a sub last week. I assume that's to guarantee he gets a game, but it is annoying that he's not in there. They bring in Ryder. Howard comes back from the COVID protocols. Ben Long into the extended squad, who was held over last week. And Dean Kent, who actually finished the Sandringham game injured. He had heavy strapping and ice on the thigh last Sunday. So I'm surprised that he's come up on a reasonably quick turnaround. And I still will die on this hill. That I understand that Cooper Sharman, there might be issues around training attitudes and things like that, but if he's not in that lineup on that extended squad ahead of somebody like Dean Kent, then I'm not standing here or sitting here. But that's the lineup heading into the Richmond game, and it is a side that can win.
Absolutely, yeah. You sort of go player by player and look and go who matchups are and that sort of thing, and you're sort of thinking a majority of those players can beat their direct opponent. That they either break even or, I mean, we've got a couple that you sort of look, okay, they got a big job ahead of them, but others you'll go that they should beat their player. We're ahead in that situation. You'd say that you talk about Revolt being there, but he's been named on the extended bench. I'm a little thinking that he's probably not going to get up. He wasn't meant to
with that thumb.
Yeah, he wasn't meant to be even close this week. So,
well, if he's a test and he's had a setback, you'd think surely he'd miss. You'd imagine.
Whether they risk him as the medical sub just to be part of the game, I don't know. That's a bit of a risk in itself.
Devil's advocate, he's pretty much finished. Would we prefer he does play?
Well,
maybe
it could be worth it, but then again, he'll come out and kick 6.
True.
It's just the sort of thing that would happen to us. That's just as likely to happen. So,
that would be so St Kilda.
And there you go. I can forecast the future with that one for today, if you like. So, So it's on paper, it looks good. We're coming back from Perth though. That's your curse. That's usually the curse that you cop. You somehow always end up with one of these top teams after we come back from Perth, or come back from Perth on a 6-day break or something, or it's luckily it's a Sunday as well, so it's not too bad in that way. But it'll be interesting to see how we are for the run. We're got a couple of fresh players back, I guess. So it's definitely winnable, but we won't be able to do it just playing 20 minutes of footy pretty much like we have the last 2 rounds. It's going to have to be, you got to play at least 3/4 of football to win this game.
Once again, there are some question marks around the selection. You've already mentioned Cooper Sharman, who's out this week. Tom Highmore's another one who just seems to be on the outer for whatever reason. An interesting one who's come in this week. I think we all expected that Dougal Howard would come straight back in as soon as he could, regardless of what Dara Joyce did on the weekend. I thought he was again very serviceable.
Yeah, he was okay. Yeah,
I don't think he really did anything wrong.
No.
But Ben Long is an interesting one because obviously if Jack Hayes plays forward, then you've already got Max King, you've got Membry, you've got Butler and Higgins. Does Ben Long play a forward defensive type role as we've, I guess, become accustomed to over the last couple of years? Or, and again, a little bit out of left field, do you put him in the middle? I mean, Richmond aren't the Richmond of previous years. You've already mentioned they're missing Dusty. They're missing a couple of those kind of prime movers as we've seen over the last few years. But they've got guys like Shea Bolton coming through that's dynamic and impacting through the middle. They're fast, they're powerful. Dylan Grimes comes back in for them down back, which is a huge in for them. Just straightens them up immeasurably. And I think he's probably one of the most underrated players possibly in the history of the game, not just in this current team, but of all time. But Ben Long in the middle, we're missing Zach Jones dearly. We miss him for his pace, his power, his grunt, his hard work, the defensive stuff that he does as well. Gresham's obviously back in there and being dynamic and being quick and winning the ball as he does, but he's still not there yet. We saw on the weekend he won the ball a lot, but disposal efficiency was through the floor. I think it was something like 32% or something for the game, and he's clearly not still 100%, and that'll take him a little while. I'm not saying drop Jade Gresham by any means, but he needs some help in there from a pace perspective, from an athleticism perspective, from a dynamicness perspective, and I just wonder if there's maybe a hint of a midfield role for Ben Long this week.
Yeah, potentially. If we look at that extended bench, we've gone. So Joyce is on the extended bench, so he won't play if Howard does. But then you've got Hayes, Crouch, Long, And I'm trying to think who else they've put on there. Mason Wood.
Lean it.
Mason Wood is on there and Burns. So
yeah,
if you'd probably take out Joyce, I'd probably suggest that Lynett might miss. So that would be 2. And then it comes down to, whether, because Ben Long's on there. So does he play? Because Crouch will play. So I think the definites on the extended bench are that Crouch will play and Joyce won't. I
think Burns stays in.
Possibly, he certainly needs a lift, but I think he'll stay in there. Yeah,
he may even end up being our sub or something.
Potentially.
Yeah.
We spoke about him the other week
and Kent is on the extended bench as well, who probably misses. Yeah,
Burns is that one that we spoke about. It's always a guy like him that you have 1 or 2 bad games and they get dropped, but then you look at other guys that might have 4 or 5 under par performances or even more and stay in the team and still have real serious roles within the team each week. And I think it would be a real shame if we penalise Ryan Burns at this stage of his career and potentially dropping him now when he's kind of, he's won his place in the team. He's earned the spot off the back of his year last year. That yes, he started the year slow. We know that, but we also know how much he has to offer and what he can bring to our squad and our team in terms of things that, attributes that other members of the squad don't have. And I think it would be a real shame and it could do real damage to his confidence if after 1 or 2, poor games that he's the one to go out ahead of potentially other more experienced guys that you expect more from regardless every week.
Yeah. And that's the problem. He hasn't got that, history behind him yet. That's where he kind of, if he gets these games, he can build it up, but he's the sort of player that's not going to be picked ahead of a seasoned player who has had all the years experience and going against a Richmond who have those few midfielders who just that bit, I guess, bit more mongrel in him. And I mean that he could be being replaced by Long. I mean, you could be on the ball saying that he's going to play into centre just for that little bit of aggression and a little bit of mongrel to just get in and under him. Because if you start getting beaten up by him in the middle, they got you done straight away.
Ben Long
plays
pretty
a
well
little bit of aggression in the middle.
Yeah.
A little bit of aggression just to say, hey, we're here, we're going to put it up to you. That could be what Long's in there for this week.
And if we play with Hayes, then we end up with a similar structure to the one they have, Richmond. So they'll have Soldo and Nankervis, and then they'll have obviously Bolter, potentially Rewalt and Lynch in the forward line. So if we go Membry, King, Hayes, and then have obviously Ryder and Marshall rotating through that role. So it depends if they want to have that. You don't want to drop Hayes, obviously, but it might happen. We'll obviously see. It's not impossible that they do that. Ryder was solid last week, and he'll definitely play. He's been obviously named forward. And then they'll sort of balance it out from there. I mean, out of Sandy last week, I mean, I thought our best player was probably Windhager in that game. He had 23, 24 touches. I think he should debut pretty soon. He gives a bit of something midfield forward. Owens was solid, probably had 20, got probably more late than early. Ryder was good. Dean Kent kicked a goal early and then got injured, so I guess that's why I'm a little bit surprised. Leo Connolly, probably his best game since coming back from the concussion, got a bit of it off half back, drifted late out of the game. Max Heath showed a bit in the ruck. Matthew Ellison had a bit of a stinker, unfortunately. He had 7 kicked on him by Mitch Brown, sort of on the last line of defence. So, and I think I'm probably missing a couple. I was probably Paris and Josiah Kyle that did little bits and pieces out of last week, but we held a lot of emergencies over. So Ben Long didn't play, Highmore didn't play because they were in Perth, Sharman didn't play because they were in Perth. So we'd like to get a few guys back. Obviously, Oscar Adams is suspended down at that level for his little driving indiscretion. So hopefully he's back soon enough. But yeah, I think it's a winnable game for us in terms of, the matchup. 50-50 or sort of close to it. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly how good Richmond are yet, whether they're still somewhere in the mix. I think they're okay, certainly. But I think we'll find out a lot on Sunday how good they are, but also how good we are. It'll be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, no, I feel like both teams aren't giving too much away at the moment either. You look at the lineups and you've got Jack Higgins and Shane Edwards named as the centre half forwards. It's a little bit of, I reckon there's a bit to play out on the list before they even get out there Sunday. It's so many different ways that I think I don't think either team's going to line up anywhere near like what they named. I think there's a little bit of bit of toing and froing that's going to happen before we actually get out there.
Was it
Definitely.
Parker? You watched Sandy last week. You were calling that game. Obviously, we know that they were an understrength Sandringham team. We know that they're obviously a lot of kind of our second stringers as well.
Yeah.
And we know that you're kind of coming up against that mob is incredibly tough any time, but especially under those circumstances. Can you start to take anything from that game for Sandy, or is it just too early and impossible under that circumstance?
Probably a bit too early. If you balance it out at VFL level, when you've got aligned teams playing against each other. So Casey had 16 Melbourne players. Sandringham had 9 St Kilda players playing, and 4 of them were first-year players. So it does create an imbalance, particularly given Melbourne are the premiers and the like. So I think for Sandy, if that game had been against, say, a non-aligned team, if they were playing Port Melbourne or Williamstown or whatever, and you got a bit of a feel for it off that might have been a little bit different. So Jake Batchelor, obviously, with the handling that side at the moment. So, yeah, I'd like to get a little bit of a look at him. Obviously hopefully not going to have Ryder in the ruck all season. So be how they balance that with Max Heath and things like that. So I think they'll be okay. So jury's out. We'll see them. I think they've got the Gold Coast in the next couple of weeks. So, we'll see how they fare in that for mine. But, that's the views looking ahead towards Richmond. Each week we do That's So St Kilda. There's always nominations. I know you guys spoke a bit about Dan Hanbury last week. Obviously, confirmation that he's got to go in for surgery. So they say he'll miss 2 months, but it really doesn't matter what they put up there. It's largely irrelevant. I guess, and look, it's not his fault necessarily. He's trying hard to get back, and don't hold anything against him personally. Clearly, it's retrospectively a very poor decision, but a lot of people said it was at the time. And now I guess they've got to decide whether they pull the pin, whether they persevere with that. But That's So St Kilda just relates to the big picture of St Kilda-Sydney relations. So we know that they've got big name draw cards off us in the past, like Lockett and Hall and even Craig O'Brien and players like that. Coming back the other way, we've had Schneider and Dempster and obviously Membry. So we've had some wins too. But I think if you look at McCartan versus Hanbury, nothing to do with each other in terms of the trade, but it does sum up that history. So we spend literally millions of dollars on Dan Hanbury to play maybe 11 games for us, ruins our chances of recruiting other players, doesn't turn into what we need it to be on field, bust. Sydney spends nothing on Paddy McCartan, who was a number 1 draft pick at our club, mind you, and they're going to get more out of him probably this year than we've ever got out of Dan Hanbury and ever will. And that's so St Kilda that we spend a fortune on a star and get nothing. They spend nothing on a project and get plenty. So that's so St Kilda.
They gave up nothing to get Tom Hickey in the ruck as well.
Yeah, that's right.
But luckily, he went via West Coast.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Mine was going to be a 3-parter. Luckily, one of them's been scratched already, and I'm hoping that means that things come in 3 and all 3 of them don't end up happening. Pretty much relates to what we were talking about before. 1, Dusty hasn't come back. We were talking last week saying that he was going to come back or announce a retirement and have a last game and have 53 touches and kick 6 or something against us and just go out on a massive high. And then Jack Reebok come in and kick 6 against us on the back of us coming back from Perth. It was just it seemed to be maybe a perfect storm that was going to cause us to be seeing the result we saw against them last year, which it would just be us that all of a sudden all this just happened and it all just basically fell away from us. That hopefully that now the dusty one's gone. We think that Jack may not play, and let's get rid of that Perth curse. Let's win coming back from the road. But it would have been so St Kilda if all those things had fallen into place when you look at it.
Very much
that would have been so St Kilda. Another thing that is so St Kilda and has been covered, I guess, fairly extensively on socials and St Kilda fan socials over the last couple of days is the Jake Bowie career
100%.
evolution at Melbourne. Obviously, his father Brett was 12 games short of allowing us to take Jake as a father-son selection. And I thought a really interesting tweet from Bruce Eva, who was on the program last year. So after Brett Bowie debuted, it took him 238 days to earn his first win at the club. Jake debuted about 243 days ago now, so just about that range. Has never lost. 9 games, 9 wins, 2 Rising Star
One of them's a flag.
2 Rising Star nominations and a premiership. So it's, I reckon he's got his old man already.
Yeah, well, that's typical.
Yeah, that is so St Kilda because, I mean, we've had horrendous... No side's benefited less from father-sons than we had. We've only had a couple historically. Chad Davis, who was just okay. Bailey Rice, which didn't work out. But, yeah, Brett Bowie, he was a really good player for us and had a few injuries and just falling short of 100 games. It's a real disappointment. I think our best chances are people like Spider Everett's son, Frankie Peckett's boys, maybe. Milne potentially.
Yep.
Yeah,
Really
so we'll...
3.
Yeah, hopefully down the track. But yeah, we had a horrendous run with the father sons over the journey. You heard Ross Smith talk about John McIntosh earlier. We didn't even get a play on his son. Stephen Lawrence, I guess, was okay for us. That's probably one.
Wasn't really a father-son pick.
No, because I don't think he qualified his old man when obviously Steve came via Brisbane. So. So we didn't really benefit from it on that occasion either. A couple of the other awards that we did mention, one is the Shannon Knoll, which is not so much an award, but we ran that last year. Have we got an early enough timeline to award a Shannon Knoll? I think we do. It's just probably tough to probably pin that on one person in particular. My Shannon Knoll probably centres around Cooper Sharman. Now, clearly he's done something that's put himself out of contention. He was the catalyst for a late season revival last year. Most of us spent the summer thinking he would revitalise our forward line. He can't get a game. And I'm putting that on him, not necessarily on the club, but come on, Cooper, mate. If your issues are training attitude, straighten up, pull your finger out. You could be the difference. Just lift.
Yeah, I was just going to add quickly before I got to get to that. I was just having a thought because I was actually talking about it the other day that Plugger had 4 daughters.
Yeah.
And so St Kilda that he didn't have 4 sons and Sydney wouldn't have had a chance at any of them.
True.
They've just fallen short. So yeah,
that's very Sydney that it didn't matter in the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think Dan Butler's got to step up a little bit. He's provided a little bit, but we're still yet to see him get back to what we saw him in his first year with us. I don't know whether he snuck under the radar that first year and his output's still pretty much the same sort of thing, but he's just getting a bit more focus on him or something. But we just need to get back to almost what we were getting at that point. That small forward, I think he could be one in the firing line if we don't start seeing something from him very soon. I guess it's Richmond this week. Let's see if he shows up against the X team as he has done before. I hope that isn't just a 4-goal game that keeps him in for the side and he doesn't kick a goal for another 8 weeks. So yeah, let's see a little bit of consistency over the next month from him. That would be what I want to see.
Well, I was going to go Jack Bartel for similar reasons to you and Cooper Sharman, Marco. But I figure that's pretty rough to give a whack to two young blokes that can't get into the team at the moment. So instead, I'm going to go the opposite way, and I'm going to go Brett Ratton this week. I think that Rats has shown enough that we know that he's a good coach. We know he can be a very good coach. And we saw the impact that he had on the way we played football when he first came into the club, the type of footy that we played in 2020. And one of the biggest complaints that I have, and we've touched on it a little bit tonight, we spoke about it last week, is this really stagnant, take a mark, stop, think about it, have a look around, look for someone sideways, backwards. Rats, go back to your roots. You want to play attacking offensive football. That is the way that the game is going back. You look at the teams that are winning games of footy now, they're taking the game on. They're playing football. They're not flooding the back line like, Clarko brought in and some of the other coaches in the mid to late 2000s. We're heading back to free-flowing offensive football and take the game on. You want to. We've got players that want to do it. Give them the license to go and do it. So, Rats, lift, mate.
And I'm going to put you on the spot because I sort of floated this, and I think that, again, there's enough body of work for us to do that. We floated the idea of the Jason Blake Award, which was a quiet achiever, and I reckon, Nick, you gave votes to one, so I might hold that one because I reckon you might use it. But my Jason Blake Award would go to probably somebody like Jimmy Webster. Doesn't always get I know you've spoken a lot about him as well, H, but probably still doesn't necessarily get the accolades of some of his teammates. And I think he's been a very fine re-addition to the list when he came back into the side last year. And he's in good form to start the season. So he'd be mine. Nick, you may want to nominate a different one, but is it your man who got the votes?
It is. It's Dan Mackenzie. Again, I think I mentioned him before. I thought that was probably his best game. He just goes about his business, just gets the job done, and to his credit, took the game on and tried to make things happen. The other one that I do want to give an honourable mention to is Darragh Joyce, and we mentioned him earlier. We spoke about him last week, and we knew that as soon as Howard came back in, that Joyce would go out. But I'm not sure that in any of the games that Darragh Joyce has played, he's really put a foot wrong. And we spoke about it last week. I don't think he deserved to get dropped for Chip Frawley last year when Frawley came back. I feel sorry for him. I think he works very hard. He obviously trains really well. He's got the trust of his teammates as well, and that the coaching staff trusts him to bring him in when someone like a Dougal Howard goes out. But I do wish at some point, without wishing ill on anybody else, that I wish that Joyce had a fair crack at it to actually have a career.
Yeah, I agree. H, have you got one for us?
I was about to say I can probably put a rope around a few names together in the way of Wilkie, Patton, Webster, throw Mackenzie in. He gave us a bit of round out of the back line as well. Just that small back group. They're not big players. The way they work together to keep us in the game, it was great. I don't think we've got any players in our back line on the weekend who have ever really got any sort of credit for any game they've really ever played from the mainstream media sort of thing. So it's just seeing them work together. It kind of reminds me of the earlier days of when Sam Fisher and Sam Gilbert and just that sort of group, how when they were nobodies, basically, they started working together. They started basically pack attacking the offensive forwards and just sort of knowing how they all work together. So as a group, they are very underrated, and yeah, it's great to see. And basically, we get our big defender back this week. Our man who's going to, I guess, lead the back line. He's chosen by the peers to be a leader down there. And yeah, hopefully you can just keep him in line again and keep him working together.
And glad Ben Patton got a mention too. I think he's come back in nicely in the last couple of weeks. That'll do us for this week's program. And I reckon we got through an entire podcast without actually mentioning Jack Steele. So they'll be our final words of this week's podcast as we head into this clash with Richmond. Go Saints, Jack Steele.